immense pleasure and honor to introduce Bill Anderson, who is CEO of Roche Pharmaceuticals, as our keynote speaker for today. Bill serves as a member of Roche's executive committee overseeing the pharmaceutical division, and he's leading an organization of 55,000 people. Bill is passionate about helping people make meaningful progress every day on the things that matter to patients. With a world-leading investment in research and development, his vision is to bring more medical advances to patients at less cost to society. His tenure at Roche has seen him serve as the CEO of Genentech, the head of global product strategy, and in roles leading the U.S. oncology and immunology business units. Bill has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Texas and earned a master's degree in management and chemical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Without further ado, please give a big round of applause to Bill.
Thanks so much, Adelina, for your kind introduction. It's very nice to be here. Actually, I haven't been in Cambridge, this Cambridge anyway, for, well, I won't tell you how many years, but it's more than 3 decades. And the last time I came here, it was my first trip ever outside of North America, and I was a college student. In fact, I was a freshman in undergrad, and I was singing in a choir, and we sang at the King's Chapel in Cambridge. And so I actually, my colleague Hans and I walked by there this morning, and I was like, it all came back. So anyway, it's been a while. We're going to talk about sustainability and healthcare, but I want to start out a little bit more on a personal note. And let me just take a survey. How many of you have ever been in need of a medical intervention for a serious condition? If you're, that's actually pretty many. You guys must live hard lives. Yeah, actually, if you had asked me that question 2 years ago, I wouldn't have raised my hand. But if you asked that question of me 1 year ago, I would have raised my hand. It's because last summer, I managed to break my right femur in 4 pieces. And yeah, I was skateboarding. I don't get a lot of sympathy from people my age on that one. They're like, yeah, no doubt. What were you thinking? I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't learning. I mean, I've skateboarded since I was, 5 years old, and I never broke anything. But there's a first for everything. And the reason I mention that is that I learned very quickly, literally in an instant, I learned what it means to need serious medical help. And, I was shattered, literally. And I was very fortunate because I was in Basel, Switzerland, and I had this accident within a mile of a great orthopedic surgery hospital. And so I had excellent care. And today, just over a year after, in fact, out this morning, I was running sprints, okay? So, it was hard work, and I had, 9 months of really intensive rehab, but I had great medical care. And it was just a very poignant reminder. And I never, by the way, I never look at somebody, I've been through many hospitals since then as part of my job, and I never look at anyone in a hospital the same way again after my experience, because I just know how needy I was. And so I just mention that because, biotechnology can sound very, sort of non-specific. But what we're talking about in life sciences in biotechnology is we're talking about millions of people around the world every year who badly need a solution to some really major problem. Parents, individuals, children, so that's why we're here. And I want to start out with that because the topic of your conference is sustainability. And I just want to put out there right up front that for me, we're not an industry. There's a lot of industries, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but I don't know. Let's say you're in the business of making wallpaper or something, right? You know, decorative lawn furniture. Okay, you need to think about sustainability in terms of how do you minimize your environmental impact? How do you make sure that you have fairness in promotions? If you're in life sciences and biotechnology, nobody should miss it. The most important contribution that we can make to sustainability is not those extrinsic things. It's basically saving somebody's life, or extending somebody's life, or giving somebody good health that would otherwise have bad health. I challenge you to name something more important for sustainability than those things, okay? And because of that, we need to make sure that mindset is baked into everything we do. And we need to get those extrinsic things right too, right? It's also good to have fairness in promotions and to be creating a workplace where everyone feels welcome. So those things are really important too, or to reduce our carbon footprint. Those are really important too, but those are extrinsic, and we need to get the intrinsic thing right. All right? What are we doing about that? Well, I just want to give you some examples from my company, Roche, at how we've approached that. We have said, hey, the greatest contribution that we can make is to improve healthcare, to better outcomes for patients. And a few years ago, we decided to dive into this some more and say, what does that really look like? And we started out by saying, okay, we make medicines. So we've delivered some really important medicines, some cures for certain types of cancer, some breakthroughs for some serious diseases. Let's do more of that. So we started out by saying, let's double the rate of output. And that's no small feat. I mean, how do you do that? You have to invest more in R&D. You have to be more productive in R&D. But we said, is that good enough? Maybe we need to do more than that. What about having medicines that are, for example, aiming for curative intent? Rather than extending someone's life a year, we want to make that cancer go away so that they have a full life expectancy. That would be an example. So things that increase the medical benefit, increase the benefit for patients. And we started feeling pretty good about this. We said, wow, if we can deliver more medicines and those medicines have a bigger impact, surely that's good enough. And we kind of went home and everyone slept on that. We came back the next day and a couple voices said, you know, that's really good, but what are we doing for society as a whole? That's what we're doing for those individual patients. And we decided that we need to help societies like the UK, like the countries that you all are from. How do we help these countries bend the cost curve? Because healthcare is literally crushing the government budgets in many, many countries around the world. And so we said we want to actually try to do this in a way that is cutting the cost to society by half. How do you do that? It could be through the things I mentioned, preventing recurrence of disease, curing people. That's one way. And then sometimes it means lower prices for medicines. And we can't forget that. And we have a role to play there as well. I mentioned having more medicines. We have to invest more in R&D. And one of the things that we've done over the last 3 years is we've made a huge shift. $3 billion, 3 billion Swiss francs, they're worth about the same right now, per year, more in R&D and less in everything else. We just said, hey, the future of our company and the future of this industry, it's all about innovation. We need to put more of our money in the innovation and basically figure out how to spend less everywhere else. That's one big thing we're doing. We're also making sure that we have a portfolio that can deliver for the large variety of remaining needs that are out there. And I just thought you might, because you're all in one way or another students of biotechnology. By the way, I'm a student of biotechnology also. You don't stop that when you leave academia. And this is, just to give you a sense of it, this is how our portfolio has evolved over the years. You can see that the overall industry, still about half of development is on small molecules, traditional small molecules. But the everything else is expanding, and you can see at Roche that we're down to about 30% of our portfolio is small molecules, and the everything else is now 70%. So we're trying to be ahead on that and make sure that we can solve diseases that maybe no one else has figured out a way to do. R&D effectiveness, how do we do this? Lots of things, right? How do we test medicines? Can we use computational biology, very advanced analytical methods to substitute for trials in many cases, or substitute for experiments? How do we generate our clinical evidence? Using real-world evidence, our subsidiary Flatiron Health is the leader in the world in real-world evidence in cancer. These are examples. And trying to remove this dichotomy of clinical care and clinical research, but to learn more from every patient today that will help tomorrow's patients. These are examples. Manufacturing and supply chain, I won't even go into the details, but we're basically trying to be good at the whole range from producing, sort of millions of pills over here to producing customized cancer vaccines. So for example, we've been in a partnership with BioNTech now for 6 or 7 years, before any of you had heard of BioNTech, using the same technology that most of you have had injected in you in the last few years. We're using that same technology to custom produce individualized RNA-based cancer vaccines that for people with metastatic cancer, that basic on the basis of the tumor fingerprint, as it were, the DNA of the fingerprint, we come up with a custom set of RNA to put into a vaccine, and this is now going into pivotal studies. So really exciting stuff, and that would be requiring, again, each dose would be custom manufactured for a particular patient. That's individualized medicine. Cost to society. I mentioned this. This is a big deal. It's not going away. In the US now, healthcare is 17% of GDP. Okay? In places like the UK, it's much less. Many would argue it needs to be more. And whether you're in a country with advanced healthcare systems or one that's developing, this is a big deal and a big topic. And we believe that a key part of sustainability for any life science company is to be figuring out, yes, we want to have that breakthrough, but how do we do it in a way that is also saving money for society? Environment, equity, these are really important topics as well. I mean, these are some of the examples of what we're doing. We're aiming for not net carbon neutrality, but we're going for zero carbon, which is a lot more difficult thing than buying swaths of rainforest, or at least somehow putting your name or claiming title to that. And this is, you can see the chart up here on the left is our track record so far, and those dots are our goals, 5 and 10 year goals, and they're very ambitious. But so far we're on track, and we're going to stay at it. In terms of equity in the workplace, an area of early focus for us was in gender equality, in leadership. We've made tremendous progress since we began to really put our backs into it. We're up now to 41% of our senior leaders are women, as an example. We've now been able to validate and verify that we have pay equity across the organization. So these are important things, extrinsic things to get right along the way. The last thing I want to talk about, which is something that's really near and dear to my heart, is how we look at work. We've been embarked for 6 years on a major rethink of what does it mean to empower people? What does that really look like? I think a lot of companies, especially big companies, over the years have talked about empowerment, but it has very little bearing on what individuals' work lives are really like. So for example, companies talk a lot about empowering people, but then they send them off to meetings where they don't have the ability to make decisions. That's not empowerment. Empowerment's not a feeling. We would say empowerment means that individuals have the decision authority to make the decisions that are close to them. And then there's a whole dialogue, and we can maybe we want to have that in some of the discussion of like, well, how do you really do that? You know, if you have tens of thousands of people in an organization, how can they all be empowered? Does that lead to chaos? Does that lead to things being out of control? And the short answer is yes, unless you do it right. But then the long answer is, how do you do it right? And that's something that we've been, made a tremendous investment in over the last 6 years. And I'm pleased to say we've made a lot of good progress. And again, love to talk about that some as well. As I said, the greatest contribution we can make is improving healthcare, which is improving lives. And I hope you'll agree with me that ought to be, at least for those of you that are in the life sciences part of biotechnology, that ought to really be all of our focus. And with that, we'll bring Adelina up, and we're going to have a little time to discuss it.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was absolutely amazing and super inspiring. And I'm sure everyone in the audience has many questions for you. So I'm going to keep mine short, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions. But of course, we just had our diversity and inclusion panel as well on board. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, because sustainable healthcare, I guess, as you said, is not only making new medicine, but it's also making medicine that's accessible to everyone, making new medicine that's accessible to everyone. So how is Roche working to sort of incorporate this aspect of inclusion and diversity during medicine development, during personalized healthcare and clinical trials?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has been something that I think has gotten a lot of focus just in the last few years. We began the journey, I don't know exactly when, maybe 5 or 6 years ago in earnest, to say, okay, how can we do a much better job in 2 spheres? One of them has to do with making sure that our clinical trials are representative, and the other has to do with how do we make sure that our medicines are actually available to all the people around the world who need them. And so those are really each in their own right large topics, very important. In clinical research, what we found is we do pretty well in terms of nationalities represented, and where we've struggled is in particular communities that are underrepresented. So, for example, in the U.S., we found African American and especially African Americans being underrepresented because of just the pattern of where are the hospitals, where they're most found, and where are the clinical research centers. And so we've been able to make, I would say, some very important progress on a limited scale so far that inspires us to make a much bigger scale effort. So, for example, during the pandemic, we noticed that the first phase 3 studies we ran of one of our medicines called Actemra in prevention of hospitalization and death from pneumonia, one of the first studies we ran, we had to run it very quickly, and when we got the results in, we noticed that we didn't have a very good ethnic diversity. And so we said, why is this? Especially when there was a lot of evidence of racial disparities in negative outcomes of COVID. And so we were able to go and basically create new research centers in some hospitals where there was an overrepresentation of some of these groups. And that study actually ended up being the basis for approvals in a number of countries. So, I mean, that was a great piece of progress, but we've got a lot more to do there. And that remains a big thrust of our work. In terms of access to care, this one is a very complex topic because the barriers, especially for high-value medicines, I mean, many of our medicines are proteins. They have certain ways they have to be administered. They have certain shipping and storage requirements. And then often they need to be given by a specialist with, for example, companion diagnostic. So it starts to be a long list of things that could be obstacles. And one of our really exciting efforts of the last few years is partnering with a group called Project Echo. Has anyone heard of Project Echo in here? Not many, yeah. This is a really exciting organization that is using telemedicine, basically using modern communications technologies to create specialists in the most remote places in the world. So, for example, I was in Malaysia recently, and we were having dialogue with the health ministry about how to set this up. So this is where you have tertiary specialists in major centers in places like Cambridge who are basically doing Zoom calls with nurses in the field in emerging markets, in emerging countries, training them to do the things that a specialist would do, say, in the West. Take those specialized tests, diagnostics, and administration of medicines. So a lot more to do, but I try to give you a few examples.
No, that was amazing. I just have a very quick follow-up question on what you just said, because you say you partner with this organization. So I guess you felt like it's on you guys to facilitate that process as well. So not only the development side, but also the distribution side. So is your opinion that broadly the industry should also be engaging with like supporting the distribution side too, not only, of course, the very research-intensive development side of new medicine?
I think the word partnering is key because we can't do it ourselves and we can't afford to do it ourselves. So in this model, we play a catalyst role. So for example, we could support the organization with a grant, but they are recruiting both, they're doing the field work in the countries on the receiving end, and they're also doing the recruiting on the, in the more developed countries, finding those specialists who are willing to dedicate their time and energy to train. And so I think that's a great model because it's not reasonable to expect that every pharmaceutical company is going to stand up an effort to train oncology specialists in developing countries. But to the extent that we can partner, we can be catalysts, I think that is something that we really want to do.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's been an emerging topic throughout the summit that, it's those communications and collaborations that really drive everything forward, because no one can really do everything on their own. No company, no matter how big and successful, can do every single aspect on their own. So that's definitely a key takeaway message. I want to shift gears a little bit because, of course, we talked a lot about Roche's work, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your work as a leader of this company and of 55,000 employees, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And about this model that you've implemented, that you talked about, the empowered, where you want every employee to be empowered. So how do you keep all those employees motivated, and how do you keep them working towards a common goal when everyone can make sort of separate decisions on their own?
Yeah, well, it's a huge topic, and let me start by saying that what leaders do is not mostly motivating people, but great leaders work to remove the obstacles that demotivate people. For example, all of you are here. Nobody is here because, I hope nobody's here because someone told you had to be here, right? But there's people who aren't here because they got blocked somehow, right? Some obstacle. And maybe the obstacle was an advisor who wasn't willing to let them go, right? So there's a lot, and especially in large organizations, and probably most of you, maybe you haven't spent a lot of time in places where you had to deal with much bureaucracy. I hope that's true, but maybe some of you have. I don't know, the way you get your courses or something, you may have found a bit of bureaucracy in that. In large companies, and frankly, when I say large companies, they don't have to be very big. I've worked at companies as small as 700 people, and believe me, bureaucracy, it sets in early. There's nowhere to hide. So why do we have bureaucracy? We have bureaucracy because we have hierarchy. Why do we have hierarchy? We put in hierarchy because we need controls. Why do we need controls? Well, without controls, you have chaos. Okay, so this is like the reductionist view on organizations is that we're kind of doomed. We're going to have bureaucracy, and we're going to have a lot of obstacles because that's what's required to kind of keep controls so that things don't spiral out of control. All right, it doesn't have to be that way. There are other ways to organize, but they are not as simple as the hierarchy. Right? Everyone can understand an org chart. You guys have seen org charts. Like, it's easy to understand. You have these 6 departments, and they each have the head of the department, and then they all report to the big boss, and then they have their own little hierarchies. Everyone can understand that. When you start talking about new ways of working, you basically have to get rid of the org chart, or at least it goes way into the background, and you have things like squads, and you have talent flow, where people are moving every 90 days. It's very dynamic, it's very exciting, and it takes a lot of thought in terms of the architecture and the systems. It's not so simple as an org chart. And so companies like Roche, we basically decided it's been about 6 years ago now, we said we have to do something different. You know, we had enough input and feedback from folks. In fact, I remember I talked to a couple people who had worked for the US government, and then they had come to work at Genentech. It was the time when I was CEO of Genentech. They told me, hey, the bureaucracy at Genentech was worse than the US government. and I was like, wow, that's a real shocker, right? But then as I've made the rounds and talked to a lot of people from other pharma companies, I heard the same thing. Like, wow, can we do something different? And I'm pleased to say we have made tremendous gains in large parts of the organization by replacing the hierarchical command and control approach with a very different approach, which, again, we could talk about some more if you guys are interested in that, but that's a huge part of my job for sure.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that that message stuck with a lot of people. So I'm not going to occupy you for longer. I'm going to let questions from the floor, which there's already many from. So, yep. Amazing. Can you please stand up and introduce yourself?
Am I starting? Hi, I'm Jeff Oster. I'm a life sciences strategy consultant at PwC. I'm also a chemical engineering graduate from UT Austin and had a leg injury this year, so that really threw me off, but it's a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for your thoughts. I was just interested, I liked the slide you flashed up regarding your pipeline, and I was hoping to get a better sense on Roche's portfolio strategy in general, and specifically, I know that there's kind of how you're optimizing against just speed to market and like optimizing for PTRS versus like real world evidence generation. You mentioned that, and I was just hoping to particularly get that in the context of how you start creating these drugs for different types of subpopulations and other types of life cycle indications.
Well, let me first just say, there's no master plan. Anyone who tells you they've got a master plan for their portfolio, like, I don't know, I think I might not want to invest in the stock of that company. Because at the end of the day, this is a field where we follow the science, and that means, every program is different. You can't, there's very few rules you can apply that apply to every program. I mean, there are broad rules like, you've got to always do what's best for patients, and you've got to listen to the data, right? But the great drug hunters of our time, of the last 100 years, if you look at their profiles and you look at how they led, there is no magic bullet. They treat each program. It'd be like, I don't know this analogy, but if you're a parent and you have 3 children, you have to apply different parenting techniques to each of the children. Molecules in a portfolio are very much that way. So, like the things for example, optimizing for speed to market versus PTS, it depends. You know, which disease, what's the competition, what do the patient needs look like? I wish I had something more general to give you, but I would say, yeah, the things that are really essential are having the tremendous ambition to advance science and advance patients' health, having a huge sense of that ambition, and then being willing to do the painstaking work of each molecule, judging it on its merits.
Amazing.
Hi, Boris Azais from MSD. I'm not sure I'm a leader of tomorrow, but I'm a skateboarder from yesterday. You get me worried on this one, but I moved to e-board now, but I'm not sure it's safer. But yeah, I was just wondering about the therapeutics that could be invented on the board, but will not be invented. I work in policy, and so my focus is really on how we translate science into products. And I can see that there's quite a number of obstacles: the regulatory process, the pricing and reimbursement process, but also very technical ones such as how long can you sustain a clinical trial, and also I wanted to touch upon disease interception. I mean, what is the, we know that the science will keep on, but are our health systems and, our review or assessment or ability to uptake biopharma innovation is up to scratch? And is that a worry?
Yeah, no, I think it's a worthy concern. Maybe I'll try to give you quickly 2 examples and potential solutions. I mean, I think in the area of monogenic disorders, there's something like, I don't know, I've heard the number quoted a few times, something like 7,000 monogenic disorders. Many of them, but not all of them, many of them would be susceptible to something like gene therapy. But many of them have patient numbers in the, I don't know, dozens in the world, right? And so I think a potential solution there is going to be platforms for gene delivery that could be approved so that they could be adapted to different monogenic disorders without going through the whole regulatory process each time. I mean, that is a challenging task to do for the regulators and for the sponsors, but I think it's worth doing, and that needs to be examined. And I think another one is early cancer detection is taking off, right? And there's a number of companies that are using innovative methods to try to find tumors, microtumors, before they would ever emerge in, for example, from symptoms. But then the question is, well, what do you do about it? And that's a field where that's going to take some innovative solutions. Is there a medicine? If it's just surgery, that's easy. You just do the surgery. But if there's something else required, then we don't really know quite how to do that yet. And that's going to take some innovative thinking, both from a clinical trial standpoint, but also regulatory. Yeah. Thanks for the questions, Boris.
Thank you. I think there's a question up there.
Hi, great presentation. I'm Madhu and I work at Amgen. I'm supporting CMC operations. So my question was something that's, we had a discussion earlier today about drug pricing. And there's always this constant theme that's posed to big pharma, right? About how do you kind of balance that influx between innovation and investment in R&D versus at the same time trying to make sure that the prices of drugs are, affordable to population. And of course, there's, multiple regulations and policies, but even our CEO is kind of, constantly in that sort of, the other side, fighting for that. So I just wanted to understand your perspective and take on how Roche is in that space right now.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Another vast topic. I think the way I've thought about it over the years, and it's a simple way to think about it, but we need access for today and we need innovation for tomorrow. And you can't just focus on one or the other. If you only focus on innovation, you say, oh, prices can be high. We need high prices because it pays for innovation for tomorrow. Yeah, well, what's the point of innovation for tomorrow if today's patients can't access the medicine, Why should we think that tomorrow's patients would be able to access that innovation either? If you focus everything on access, you can say, well, hey, we could just make all medicines free today. But then there would be no medicines for tomorrow unless we have some optimists in here who think that the government is going to develop medicines. I don't know. Maybe that could happen, but I don't think it's very likely. Then you say, well, what's the solution? The big solution on this is that people can and will pay according to their ability to pay. And on a global basis, what that means is that richer countries and richer people in any country would pay more for medicines than poorer countries or poorer people in any country. And that is the thrust of, I'd say, most of our strategies are around that. How do you achieve that? And honestly, there are bad actors in that. It's unfortunate that there are major Western countries that are constantly sort of unwilling to pay for innovation by paying reasonable prices for today's breakthroughs. And they basically are just, they basically say, here's the most we'll pay based on a cost per quality. How many of you have studied cost per qualities, right? Cost per qualities, they take no account of the patent system and the fact that after 10 or 12 years, the patents expire and those medicines will be 80% reduced price, okay? But in the cost per quality, they only look at, well, what's today's price? And so what those countries do is basically sit on the sidelines, refuse to pay for the medicine or refuse to pay a reasonable price for the medicine that provides for future innovation, and then wait to the price drops, and then it's available. And I'm not naming any countries, but I think you all know who I'm talking about. We're very close to one of those countries right now.
Amazing, thank you.
Hi, Bill. My name is Janelle, and I'm a patient safety fellow at Roche UK, pharma, not diagnostics. Precision medicine or personalized healthcare solutions are obviously a huge priority and a huge part of the pharma vision. I'm just wondering, as a leader yourself, are there any particular challenges you've faced in navigating Roche through this space, which is still very much a work in progress?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's so many different levels of personalized medicine. What does that mean? To me, you have to look at the outcome. The desired outcome is that you have the right medicine for the right patient at the right time. And in some cases, that right medicine, in the case of the RNA-based cancer vaccine that I mentioned, that right medicine is literally one that's custom engineered and manufactured for that individual patient. In other cases, it just means that the patient's getting a highly effective medicine. So, for example, we have a therapy for hemophilia A that is highly effective, and it works pretty much in every segment. So you say, well, then what's the role of personalized medicine there? And I would say, well, maybe there's not one, and who cares? The best personalized medicine is one that works for every person. And so we don't have to obsess about individualized medicine. I think what we want is individualized care, where every patient has the best chance at a great therapy. And for that, we're relying on the science, the evolving technology of diagnostics, and we're making great gains. And frankly, I'd say the regulators are doing a pretty good job of, in some cases, leading the industry, in other cases, adapting behind. But I hope that helps.
I just had a follow-up thought on that. So would you say that we are running the risk of sort of going to the opposite direction, of sort of over-focusing on personalized developments to the point where we forget that a generic therapy that works very well may be just as, or even more impactful?
Maybe sometimes in our talk, there's too much talk about it. I think the reality is doctors, healthcare providers, they know the value of a great medicine. And I think, frankly, companies have large incentives to develop medicines that work for everyone. It's just often you can't. You just can't find that medicine because of the heterogeneity of the disease.
Amazing. Oh, great.
Hi, my name is Reza. Thank you so much for your talk. Just to follow up on the drug pricing, you said that countries should be able to pay based on what they can pay. But the truth is that even richer Western countries are struggling to pay for drug prices. The NHS itself is always struggling to pay for drug prices. We're now using basics of drug classes, and we're one of the richest countries allegedly in the world. So to what extent do you think that's not just Roche, but other pharmaceutical companies' responsibility due to the high drug prices, and do you think you have a responsibility to lower it without obviously going against your cost-profit margins?
I think there's a simple way to think about it. In pretty much every developed country, the cost of medicines is somewhere between 10 and 15% of healthcare totals. And unlike many other types of interventions, healthcare interventions, we have the patent system, which means that our therapies become almost like a gift in perpetuity to the system once the patents expire. For politicians, it's a lot easier to target drug prices as being the problem, as has recently happened in the US, right? Again, if you're solving a problem in your lab or in your company, are you going to focus where you have a very highly effective sort of set of investments that represent 15% of your total, or are you going to focus on the 85% where the costs never cease to increase? But the problem is in the political system, you basically put your politician hat on. Am I going after drug companies that are kind of easy target, or am I going after, let's say, healthcare providers and hospitals? It's a challenging thing, but I think first off, countries like the UK have a budget allocation issue. I mean, they do not invest enough in healthcare, and again, when you look at a very advanced nation, which the UK is, and you look at the percent of GDP invested in healthcare, which is like one of the lowest of any comparable countries, I have a hard time accepting there's a cost of drugs problem. There's a lack of healthcare investment problem. In countries like the US, where I don't think anyone could argue there's a lack of healthcare investment, a lack of healthcare spending anyway, there I think you have to say, hey, if we want to get serious about tackling healthcare costs, we have to look at the 100% of healthcare costs, not the 15% that's politically expedient.
Amazing. Unfortunately, I think we are almost close to time, but I want to give you the chance for the final minute to just say maybe a short message to our leaders of tomorrow. What is sort of the key takeaway that you want for them to go away from this auditorium with and sort of into their surely inspiring future careers?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about some inspiring things and we've talked about some hard-hitting topics. But one thing I want to leave with you is about, let's see, how long has it been? 25 years ago, I had started my career, but I could tell the field I was in, it just wasn't that exciting. I wasn't satisfied that field was doing enough for humanity. The science wasn't evolving. And I said at the time, what is an area that would be really great technology, great science, and would be doing something great for the world? And I said, biotechnology, okay? That line of thinking, if anything, it's more true for you today than it was for me 25 years ago. You got the right field. I mean, go with it. And you can put yourself out there. Be the best at whatever you're doing. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got to go over here, I got to go over there. And don't try to change the world tomorrow. Invest in a career where you're going to change the world over the course of the career. There's no junk food in biotechnology. You got to invest in solid food and in real stuff. And so, yeah, I was really thrilled to have the opportunity to come and talk with you all. I'm really excited for you all and what you're going to deliver in the next 30 years. And thanks for your dedication to making a difference. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill.